In the summer of 1971, the American public was confronted with a revelation that would forever alter its understanding of the Vietnam War and the trust it placed in its government. The Pentagon Papers, a top-secret Department of Defense study detailing decades of U.S. involvement in Vietnam, exposed a pattern of deception, miscalculation, and manipulation that spanned multiple administrations. Leaked by Daniel Ellsberg, a former military analyst turned whistleblower, the documents laid bare the extent to which successive presidents had misled Congress and the public about the scope and nature of the conflict. The release of the Pentagon Papers not only ignited a fierce legal battle over press freedom, but also catalyzed a broader reckoning with the ethics of governance, the limits of executive power, and the role of transparency in a democratic society. Commissioned in 1967 by Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, the study was officially titled Report of the Office of the Secretary of Defense Vietnam Task Force. It comprised 47 volumes, totaling over 7,000 pages, and traced U.S. political and military involvement in Vietnam. From 1945 to 1968, McNamara's stated intention was to create an encyclopedic history that could inform future policy decisions and prevent the repetition of past mistakes. However, the study's findings were damning. They revealed that the United States had systematically escalated its involvement in Vietnam while concealing the true nature of its actions from the public. The documents detailed covert operations, secret bombings, and internal assessments that contradicted official statements, painting a picture of a government more concerned with preserving credibility than pursuing truth. Daniel Ellsberg, who had worked on the study as a consultant for the Rand Corporation, initially supported the war effort, but as he delved deeper into the documents and witnessed the widening gap between public rhetoric and private reality, his convictions shifted. Ellsberg became increasingly disillusioned with the war and the government's handling of it. Motivated by a sense of moral urgency, he decided to leak portions of the study to the New York Times. On June 13, 1971, the Times began publishing excerpts under the headline Vietnam Archive. Pentagon study traces 3 decades of growing U.S. involvement. The impact was immediate and explosive. The Nixon administration, which had inherited the war but was not directly implicated in the early decisions documented in the papers, reacted swiftly. Claiming that the publication posed a threat to national security, the Justice Department sought an injunction to halt further reporting. This marked the beginning of a landmark legal confrontation between the government and the press. The case, New York Times Co. v. United States, reached the Supreme Court in record time. In a 6-3 decision, the court ruled in favor of the newspapers, affirming the First Amendment's protection of press freedom and rejecting the government's argument for prior restraint. The ruling underscored the principle that a free press serves as a check on governmental power and is essential to the functioning of democracy. The contents of the Pentagon Papers were as significant as the legal battle they provoked. They revealed that the U.S. had secretly expanded the war to neighboring countries such as Laos and Cambodia, conducted covert operations without congressional approval, and consistently misrepresented the progress of the war. The documents showed that officials privately doubted the likelihood of success, even as they publicly assured victory. For example, internal memos acknowledged that the South Vietnamese government was corrupt and lacked popular support. Yet the U.S. continued to invest resources and lives in its defense. The papers also documented the manipulation of intelligence and the deliberate crafting of narratives to maintain public support. One of the most striking revelations was the extent to which the Johnson administration had escalated the war under false pretenses. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, which served as the catalyst for congressional authorization of military force, was portrayed in the papers as a misrepresented event. The documents suggested that the administration had exaggerated, fabricated details to justify a dramatic increase in troop deployments and bombing campaigns. This manipulation of facts raised profound questions about the integrity of democratic decision-making and the accountability of elected officials. The release of the Pentagon Papers also had a profound impact on the culture of whistleblowing and the public. Relationship with classified information. Ellsberg's actions were initially met with fierce condemnation from the government, which charged him with conspiracy, espionage, and theft of government property. However, the case against him unraveled amid revelations of misconduct by the Nixon administration. In its efforts to discredit The White House had authorized a break-in at the office of his psychiatrist, an illegal act that would later become part of the broader Watergate scandal. The charges against Ellsberg were eventually dismissed, and he emerged as a symbol of conscience and resistance. The Pentagon Papers also influenced journalism, reinforcing the role of investigative reporting in holding power to account. The courage of the New York Times and the Washington Post, which continued publishing the documents despite legal threats, demonstrated the press's capacity to challenge official narratives and inform the public. The episode galvanized a generation of journalists and set a precedent for future disclosures, including the publication of the Watergate tapes and, decades later, the revelations of WikiLeaks and Edward Snowden. Beyond the immediate political and legal ramifications, the Pentagon Papers prompted a deeper philosophical inquiry into the nature of truth, secrecy, and governance. They exposed the tension between national security and democratic transparency, raising the question of when, if ever, the government is justified in withholding information from its citizens. The papers suggested that secrecy, while sometimes necessary, can become a tool of manipulation and control when wielded without oversight. They also highlighted the moral dilemmas faced by individuals within the system, analysts, officials, and soldiers who must navigate the conflict between duty and conscience. The legacy of the Pentagon Papers continues to resonate. In 2011, the full study was officially declassified and made available to the public, affirming the enduring importance of historical transparency. The episode remains a touchstone in debates over government accountability, press freedom, and the ethics of whistleblowing. It serves as a reminder that democracy depends not only on institutions, but on the courage of individuals willing to speak truth to power. The Pentagon Papers also invite reflection on the broader trajectory of U.S. foreign policy. They reveal a pattern of interventionism driven by ideological imperatives and strategic calculations, often at the expense of local realities and ethical considerations. The Vietnam War, as documented in the papers, was not merely a military conflict, but a manifestation of Cold War anxieties and the desire to project American influence. The failure to achieve a coherent and honest strategy in Vietnam foreshadowed similar challenges in later conflicts, from Iraq to Afghanistan. In examining the Pentagon Papers, it is essential to recognize the complexity of the decisions and motivations involved. The officials who escalated the war were not uniformly malevolent or cynical. Many believed they were acting in the nation's best interest. However, the documents reveal how good intentions can be corrupted by institutional pressures, political expediency, and the fear of appearing weak. They show how the pursuit of credibility can override the pursuit of truth, leading to policies that are unsustainable and unjust. The papers also underscore the importance of historical memory. By documenting the internal deliberations and contradictions of U.S. policy, they provide a valuable resource for scholars, policymakers, and citizens seeking to understand the past and avoid its mistakes. They remind us that history is not merely a record of events, but a repository of lessons, warnings, and insights. In this sense, the Pentagon Papers are not just a chronicle of a war, they are a mirror held up to the soul of a nation. The story of the Pentagon Papers is ultimately a story of reckoning. It is a confrontation with uncomfortable truths, a challenge to official narratives, and a call to accountability. It reveals the fragility of democratic norms and the resilience of democratic ideals. It shows that even in times of crisis, the principles of transparency, integrity, and public engagement must be upheld. And it affirms that the pursuit of truth, however difficult, is essential to the health of a free society. As the United States continues to grapple with questions of war, secrecy, and governance, the Pentagon Papers remain a vital reference point. They remind us that the cost of deception is measured not only in lives lost, but in trust eroded. They challenge us to demand honesty from our leaders and vigilance from our institutions. And they inspire us to believe that, even in the face of overwhelming power, the truth can prevail.